I hate this game. Kingdom Hearts has been a part of my gaming life for as long as it's existed pretty much, which at this point is 15 years, which is a respectable amount of time to be obsessed with a game, if I may say so myself. Related, as the world keeps turning and the sun keeps burning, there is one question we gamers must ask ourselves time and time again. Why do JRPGs love religious symbolism so much? It's because it's easy to use. Honestly, it's not that hard to figure out. Well, I say easy to use, but the fact of the matter is that religious symbols have been misused in Japanese media almost as much as they've been used correctly, in both context and actual meaning. One notoriously famous example is the anime Neon Genesis Evangelion, which features both a very smartly used application of Abrahamic symbols and terms, along with loads of absolutely pointless symbolism porn for the sake of stuff. And of course, my beloved Persona series and all its Shin Megami Tensei influenced glory is far from free of religious symbols as well. Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Tales of... Honestly, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a JRPG that doesn't indulge in more or less heavy-handed religious symbolism to at least some extent. Now, some of you might feel tempted to raise a hand and point at our Disney-approved, oh-so-child-friendly friend, Kingdom Hearts, as a clear exception to this rule. To which I say... Believe it or not, but Kingdom Hearts is loaded chock full with religious symbolism just as much as most other games Square Enix has put out over the years. It's just slightly more subtle about it. Sure, you won't find any conspiracies of evil organized churches, religious chants, or crosses all over the place. Oh wait. But I'm still pretty sure that somewhere during the conceptualization process, Nomura, wondering what it is that Western Disney-loving folks are into when it comes to symbolism, must have picked up a book on Judaism and Christianity. Or maybe he just did a quick Google search. Who knows? That's all it takes me to come up with half of my stuff. Don't believe me? Alright, then just take a look at the way Sora's default Keyblade and its dark counterpart, the Two Kingdom Keys, look. Then compare them to one of the most important symbols of papal authority in the Catholic Church, the Keys of the Kingdom. Not really hard to see what's going on here, is it? And there's far more where that came from, friends. I'll have to come back to the key thing later. Of course, this is far from the first time Nomura has been involved in a game involving Abrahamic symbols. Seriously, just Google Sephiroth meaning and see what you get. But what fascinates me about Kingdom Hearts' use of these symbols specifically is which symbols Nomura and his team decided to use and how they applied them. Despite of the terms and iconography it borrows from monotheism, the universe of Kingdom Hearts does not run on a Christian or Jewish framework. Whether, as I've addressed in my video comparing Kingdom Hearts and Persona, the cosmology of Kingdom Hearts runs on a philosophy much more familiar to its native Japan, modern Taoism, specifically the concept of Taiji, the idea that everything in the world appears in the form of two extremes, which complete each other, reaching their ultimate potential when they come together. In my years of reading into the writings of Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung, I once stumbled upon a statement made by a third party, claiming that Jung struggled with Christianity as a philosophy due to the strong contradiction it poses to the ideas of Taoism. While in Taoism, one extreme can never exist without the other, Christianity propagates the idea of a divine absolute, which mankind must strive to reach, casting off its opposite, personified in the devil and his dominion, hell, in the process. In Taoism, the idea of casting off one extreme and indulging only in the other to reach perfection is unthinkable. Kingdom Hearts, however, uses Christian symbols within a Taoist framework, deliberately drawing attention to the struggle between the two philosophies in the process, and, to some extent, even trying to reconcile them. This makes perfect sense when one knows about Japan's own relationship to religion, which is a lot more similar to how ancient cultures such as the Romans treated their religion than to our modern understanding of it. When it comes to spiritual beliefs, Japan has a long history of syncretism, the practice of freely combining foreign belief systems with one's own, treating the new material as an augmentation to the old beliefs, rather than as a contradiction or a threat to them. To make it simple, a culture that practices syncretism doesn't declare religions other than its own as wrong. Rather, it will try to explain the other religion away as something still fitting within the framework of one's own, which makes it a-okay to go to a Christian church to marry, even if you prayed at the local Shinto shrine to find love in the first place. The Abrahamic faiths religions. The Abrahamic religions have given up on practicing open syncretism early in their history, mostly for political reasons that required the Hebrew people to draw clear lines between themselves and other communities in order to sustain themselves. But it survived in other cultures, and Japan is one of those cultures. That's why a majority of the Japanese population don't openly declare themselves as belonging to any specific faith, and why Shintoist, Buddhist, and even Christian customs are freely mixed and matched in almost every aspect of Japanese life and storytelling. So, in much the same way as Kingdom Hearts syncretizes the Western storytelling of Disney movies into the style of Japanese role-playing games such as Final Fantasy, the games also syncretize Abrahamic symbols and terms into the framework of Eastern philosophies. But enough of me beating around the bush. After all this rambling, I'm sure you want me to show some actual concrete examples of this in the games, other than just waving a literal pair of keys in front of your eyes like you're easily amused infants or something. Now, while I currently consider myself an agnostic theist, I was raised as a Catholic Christian and do know a fair bit about the law, the symbols and terminology of the faith. However, just to make sure I don't say anything completely off base in the following section, I had my boyfriend, who's a practicing Christian himself, help me with the research for this, video thing, 3-part video essay? Yeah, let's go for that. Multi-part video essay, because that's what all the cool kids do these days, I think. Originally, I'd planned to only do a single video on this topic, but when I realized just how long that one video would inevitably end up being if I don't condense every single point down to the point that individual topics become nigh incomprehensible to understand, I decided to take a multi-part approach instead. Honestly, I don't think I'll be able to cover every single symbol or parallel to Abrahamic law that Kingdom Hearts has, even in multiple videos. So consider what follows here just a small selection of and introduction to a well that goes much deeper. If you spotted anything in the games that I don't end up mentioning, feel free to bring it up in the comments. I'm sure people would love to read about it. Anyway, with the basics out of the way, I start with what I consider to be the most obvious and easy to understand bullet point on my list of parallels, namely... Yeah, I see you going all aesthetic in the comments already, but keep those ego faces to yourselves. I'm genuinely referring to the way the games look and sound here. I'm starting with this because it's one of the first things that become apparent in the games. When you first take control of Sora in the very first game, you are in the Dive to the Heart, a reoccurring place in the franchise meant to represent the hearts of various characters, usually appearing to them in visions or dreams. The moment Sora steps into the first station within the Dive to the Heart, its surface explodes into a flock of white doves, as their feathers reveal the station's mural. In Judaism, white doves are seen as a representation of the spirit of God, as well as human souls in general, which fits very well with Kingdom Hearts' concept of the heart. Additionally, in Christianity, doves are seen as a symbol of peace, so their appearance might be connected to something that Sora hears just seconds later, a disembodied voice telling him, "Don't be afraid." A phrase also used fairly commonly in the Bible whenever people seem overwhelmed by the situation, often accompanied by "Peace be with you." The doves in this phrase are meant to communicate to Sora and the player to feel at ease and progress at their own pace, no matter how threatening everything in this tutorial seems, since ultimately things will go in their favor, so the symbols are used very effectively here. The surfaces of the individual stations located in the dive almost always appear to be stained glass murals, glowing with a light from a source located somewhere below them. Stained glass windows, as the ones seen in the dive to the heart, are a common feature in sacred architecture of Abrahamic religions, especially Christianity. They first became immensely popular with the so-called Gothic style of church architecture, which was created specifically to enable the use of such windows in the first place. You see, the older style of church architecture, the Romantic style, placed a lot of load on the outer walls, making it impossible to incorporate large windows in them, as they would have been crushed under the weight of the roof. This often left Romantic churches as very dark, gloomy places, very unfitting for a religion that sees light as the manifestation of God himself, the most divine thing visible to mankind. Oh yes, we're getting to it. The reason Gothic architecture aimed to take the load off church walls was none other than light. The less load the walls had to bear, the more light could enter the church from outside. And the more light there was, the closer the praying believers felt to the divine presence of their God. Additionally, the colorful murals depicted in the windows could be used as a means for the common church-going public, who were largely unable to read, to experience the stories of Christian canon in a way they could understand, which also caused these types of windows to be known as the poor man's Bible. The heart stations in Kingdom Hearts not only incorporate smaller, narrower windows on their sides, which look exactly like those on the most famous Gothic churches. Just like their real-life equivalent, they also tell stories, relaying something important about the heart they represent to their visitor. For example, Sora's heart station depicts Destiny Island, along with images of his friends, representing his origin, the things most important to him, and frames it all with crown symbols, representing his destiny. I'll get to that. The way the stations seem to perpetually gleam and glow is probably related to the light of their owners' hearts, much like how Gothic windows are supposed to allow one to experience the divine light of God. The heart stations thus celebrate the sacred nature of the heart's light in much the same way as Gothic windows celebrate the light of God. Similar aesthetics continue in the same early part of the game with the background music. One of the main songs of the franchise, the Stati, was clearly composed to sound like a church choir. Specifically, it is very similar in style to the famous piece Miserere by Italian composer Gregorio Allegri. Incidentally, the Stati is sung in Italian. Miserere was historically treated as a great secret of the Vatican and only performed at sundown during Tenebrae services during the Holy Week. It is accompanied by all lights in the cathedral, save for one single candle being extinguished, symbolizing a single light of hope that remains shining in midst of the deep darkness of our sins. Sound like Kingdom Hearts lore already? Now, this is more of a side note, but the connection goes a bit further when you consider that Miserere wasn't only considered sacred, but also forbidden. Similarly, the Stati can be considered something of a forbidden piece itself. Yoko Shimomura, composer of the Kingdom Hearts series, has gone on record saying that the song is meant to represent the dark side of Kingdom Hearts, and that, incidentally, the staff of the game considers it somewhat of a cursed song, due to the various incidents that occurred when trying to load the complex choir piece for editing. For example, one time loading the Stati into the engine caused the entire development complex to lose power for a couple of hours. Ooh, spooky. Other aesthetic symbols reminiscent of Christianity can be found all over the games, such as the use of a cross-like symbol to represent the Keyblade wielders of the Land of Departure, and the armor and lifestyles of the Keyblade wielders generally seeming similar to what people associate with medieval knights, specifically the Crusaders, something that I will, again, get back to at a later point. There's also the very Gothic and Baroque-inspired architecture of Hollow Bastion and Radiant Garden, and the use of bat wings to represent darkness and dove wings to represent light, two features usually associated with devils and angels respectively. In this way, we can see a clear pattern in which iconography related to the divine in Christianity and Judaism is used to represent Kingdom Hearts' concept of light, while symbols traditionally related to God's adversaries and hell are associated with Kingdom Hearts' concept of darkness. Now, this could easily be as deep as the symbolism goes. However, unlike Christianity, in which God is always good and his adversaries are always evil, Kingdom Hearts doesn't quite work like that. As I've mentioned and also discussed in a previous this video, Kingdom Hearts' use of light and darkness is closer to the concepts of yang and yin rather than just straight up good and evil, resulting in characters such as Riku, who uses darkness-themed attacks and abilities, even while still clearly on the side of good, or characters such as Ericus, who uses nothing but light-themed moves, even while in the process of trying to kill one of our main characters. In Birth by Sleep, the fairy godmother even points out that more light doesn't always equal better. The symbiotic relationship between light and darkness portrayed in Kingdom Hearts has some interesting side effects when it comes to its Abrahamic aesthetics. For example, while I've already pointed out Radiant Garden and the Land of Departure featuring a lot of Christian-ish architecture and iconography, the same can be said for the castle in the world that never was, which seems to be styled after a monastery of sorts. Now, later plot twists all aside, I think no one would argue the fact that the Organization 13 is definitely not on the side of good in the game. Yet the cult-like hierarchy and worship of their goals results in them being associated with a twisted version of many symbols and style choices also associated with the Keyblade wielders of the Land of Departure, who are clearly our heroes. In universe, having Terra as a connecting link between the two places does explain some of these similarities. However, on a meta level, it hints at how Kingdom Hearts is ready to forego the common dichotomies of good symbols versus evil symbols, putting things into a new context in the process. Sure, Bad Rings can stand for Xehanort and his schemes, or for specific Heartless, but it is also a symbol of Riku and his Way to Dawn keychain, as well as his signature Dream Eater, the Komori Bat. A hat with a cross-shaped tail can stand for the homeworld of Aqua, Terra and Ren, but it can also stand for Organization 13, and crosses in general are just all over the place. On the hat stations, you can walk over stained glass, a symbol of light, while listening to the Stati, a song of darkness. Does that make the dive to the heart a good place or an evil place? It's neither. Light and darkness exist side by side there, and only the circumstances of the visit determine whether the place remains serene and peaceful or becomes a battlefield. Kingdom Hearts takes symbols from Abrahamic religion and puts them into a context which may not be entirely divorced from their original use, yet alters their meaning just enough to confuse the players who recognize them, making them question whether or not what we're looking at or hearing is supposed to be good or evil, something that becomes particularly effective in conjunction with some of the more ambiguous aspects of the series, such as the many plot twists regarding Organization 13, Riku's character arc, the complex backgrounds of many of Xehanort's incarnations, and the entirety of Kingdom Hearts Chi. Wait, Kingdom Hearts Chi? Ambiguous? What am I saying? I must be out of my mind. It's evil! Join me next time when I'm going to take a more concrete look at some of the symbols used in the series, namely those more commonly associated with our main playable character, Sora. Hey everybody, Nanny here again, thanking you for watching this video. If you like what you saw, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more. I also have a Patreon you can support if you want to enable me to make more of these. And a Tumblr you can go if you want to ask me anything you don't feel comfortable asking in the comment section. Well then, bye!